Hello, I'm Nick Offerman, white male translator for Gaslit Nation. To sum up this week's episode, kleptocracy anywhere is kleptocracy everywhere, and this is a transnational crime syndicate masquerading as a government. Thanks for listening.
Alio?
Paul, I need your help.
Arranging an interview with Stalin.
Go see Walter Duranty at the New York Times. Listen, I really need to talk to you. I found something big. You can break this story wide open.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Duranty.
So why are you really here?
I need your help.
This is Ada Brooks. She's my star.
What do you want?
The story no one is talking about.
Ukraine.
Stalin's gold.
You will retract your statements to the press immediately.
Or they will shoot our engineers.
You actually thought you could interview Stalin and make some kind of difference, didn't you?
Here's the agenda now.
I don't have an agenda, unless you call truth an agenda.
I'm Sarah Kendzior, the author of the best-selling books The View from Flyover Country and Hiding in Plain Sight.
I'm Andrea Chalupa, a filmmaker and journalist, and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, which is available now wherever you stream your films, like Amazon, iTunes. Check your local listing. In today's episode, we are going to be playing interviews with Agnieszka Holland, the director of Mr. Jones, James Norton, the star of Mr. Jones, who plays Gareth Jones, who was inspired by the real-life Welsh journalist who risked his life and career to expose Stalin's genocide famine, which killed millions of people, the vast majority Ukrainian. And this genocide was covered up actively with the help of Walter Duranty, the Moscow bureau chief for the New York Times, a social ringleader for the literati of that age who would flock to Moscow looking at Stalin's great workers' utopia. And Walter Duranty is played by Peter Sarsgaard, who we will also be hearing from in this episode. Now, I want to share that these interviews were recorded when we were all together at the Berlin Film Festival in 2019, launching the film for the first time. Agnieszka Holland, the director, as soon as she finished her cut, her director's cut, as soon as it was done, she said, "Get this out there right now." It was like she was hitting send on a tweet. Like she just wanted to, she had a lot to say. She had a lot to say with this film, and she wasn't going to wait to say it. So the first film festival that accepted it was right around the corner, and that was the Berlinale, the Berlin Film Festival. So we all went there. But ironically, the film wasn't actually scheduled to hit theaters until at the very end of the year, so it enjoyed a very long film festival time, going to film festivals in Turkey, Israel, across Europe, South Korea, and other places. And I'm so grateful for that now, looking back, because of the pandemic. So thank you to Agnieszka Holland for your passion and having so much to say with this film and fighting so hard all these years and making it to get it out into the world, and for having that foresight to get it out as soon as possible because of that urgency you had to say what needed to be said. These interviews were recorded right after the big sweeping blue wave elections in the US, so you may hear a bit of reference to that. And I'm just excited to finally share this with you. And I want to say special shout out to my co-host, Sarah Kendzior. I called Sarah from the set of Mr. Jones, basically saying, I don't want to come back to the US. Everything's on fire. Let's finally start that damn podcast we've been talking about for forever. And so as a coping mechanism for returning to the US after filming for many months in Europe, in Ukraine, Poland, and Scotland, I flew back to New York City from Poland, and a week later I flew to St. Louis and recorded the very first episodes of Gaslit Nation in Sarah's dining room. We have Mr. Jones in some ways to thank for Gaslit Nation.
Yep, and that was 2 years ago, basically today. So happy anniversary, Gaslit Nation. Things have only gone uphill for the world since that fateful time. And we hope that you enjoy these interviews.
Great. Oh, and we're gonna start by launching a clip from the film. Here we have a Act 3 clip where Gareth Jones has just returned from his illegal tour of Ukraine. He has slipped inside. He eluded his Soviet censor, and he witnesses ghost village after ghost village in Ukraine as though all the people have been abducted. And he's just been brought back by the Soviet secret police, and he's now in the heart and belly of the beast in Moscow, where he runs into Walter Duranty, who is there for an emergency press conference for reasons you'll see in the film. And this is a face-off between Gareth Jones versus Walter Duranty, which is a larger conversation about the role of the journalist today.
Mr. Jones, I'll have you know I convinced them to let you go. You don't deserve to be in a prison for your bravery.
You knew, Mr. Duranty.
You what?
How much is Stalin paying you? What's keeping you here, lying for them?
You wouldn't know the first thing about how difficult it is to report from Moscow today, would you? Of course not. You're just a child. But it is not the job of a journalist to say, "How dare you, sir?" You actually thought you could interview Stalin and make some kind of difference, didn't you?
A souvenir from my trip. Tree bark. It's all the people have left to eat.
All right. Yes. My dear Mr. Jones, there comes a time in every man's life when he must choose a cause greater than himself, than all his miserable little ambitions put together. Perhaps someday you will. It's a shame. You would have made a fine journalist.
Agnieszka Holland is one of Poland's most eminent filmmakers and a leading political voice in Poland for human rights, often facing off with the country's Trump-like government that openly attacks LGBTQ people and other marginalized groups. Her mother participated in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising against the Nazis and aided several Jewish people during the Holocaust, receiving the Righteous Among the Nations Medal from the Yad Vashem Institute in Israel. Holland grew up in Soviet-occupied Poland. Her parents were journalists that faced pressure from the regime. Her father's official cause of death was suicide while under police interrogation. As a film student in Prague in 1968, Holland protested the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in a pro-democracy movement known as the Prague Spring. She was arrested and imprisoned for her activism. She would later make an award-winning HBO miniseries inspired by this time called Burning Bush, about Jan Palach, the young Czech student who set himself on fire to protest the normalization of Soviet brutality. Holland has made dozens of films, including the Oscar-nominated Europa, Europa, the true story of a Jewish boy who hid in Hitler's youth to survive, the Oscar-nominated In Darkness, the true story of a sewage inspector who hid Jewish people in the sewers of a Polish city during the Holocaust, and the childhood classic The Secret Garden. She has directed hit TV series like The Wire and House of Cards.
Agnieszka,
Yes, it's me.
you have a heart of gold.
I have what?
A heart of gold.
Heart of gold?
Your heart is made of gold.
No, I don't believe you. I don't think so. My heart is made from flesh and blood and muscles, and it's pumping blood, and it doesn't have no feelings.
After all these years. No, but you are a purely spirited person, or else you would have never taken a chance on me. Just me, an email and a script, and seeing how you work with everyone. You're so generous. And how do you survive so long with it in an industry, in a world filled with idiots? Like, how do you survive and keep that goodness?
Oh, I have some good genes, some generous genes, because it's true that the world is not very merciful. But sometimes it's nice also. You are meeting some people who are like giving you back some kind of kindness or some kind of emotions or some kind of, how to tell, knowledge. Some, make you wiser or make you, show you the world in the different perspective that you are seeing it yourself. So it is not negative. I cannot say that my journey in this profession is negative. I met a lot of great people, and mostly the people I was working with, most of them, they've been really very generous and very grateful. And the actors also, the actors are wonderful people. So if I'm counting positives and negatives, I think I can find more positives than negatives, which probably is not the case in the profession like politics.
Definitely not. So one thing I want everyone to know is that on 2 different occasions, people with a lot of money and millions of euros at stake wanted you to hire a new writer, and both times you said no. It was just the conversation was over. And then we we didn't get that money, but we ended up, of course, making the film, and it was fine. Could you talk about, not to flatter me, of course, but I mean, just the pressures, I guess, because you have to go through so many gatekeepers to make a film. And how do you navigate the pressures of people trying to change it and force you into doing things, or else you're not going to get to the next level?
I'm probably not interested in doing any film. If I decided to make the film like that, it was because of your script and because of your approach, and because the ideas were inside, and it inspired me. It means it made me interested in telling the story. And if I was interested in the story only, I could read the books, which I'm doing anyway. But if I want to tell the story in the way which is personal and inspiring, I hope, for others, I need to believe that I'm doing it honestly and that I'm doing it in not too conventional way. It means that I'm not following the paths which are already cleared, which are already easy. With every next film I'm doing, and I know that I don't have so much of time to spend the year of my life with something I don't deeply believe in. I have some principles, and for example, if you came with the project, I will not left you on the side of the road. I think that I will never feel well about it. It's for my well-being and well-feeling about myself, but I'm not a traitor. I don't like betray people who especially the people who trusted me.
And in terms of being a woman in this industry, because Gareth Jones got made through women. It was a woman director, a woman delegate producer with Claudia Smieja, and women sales agents and a woman main investor. That was sort of how we were hacking the system, was going through women. Because, of course, Stashik, our male producer who loves strong women, that's his weakness. So what is sort of your advice for being a woman in this industry and generally, and sort of navigating a really tough industry?
You have to be strong. It means you can, because if you are, you have to be perseverant, because women has double of obstacles the man has, and even for men, this industry is not easy. And you have to be assertive. It means you have to defend yourself and your beliefs and your ethics. My method is to be myself. It means maybe it's not the most efficient method in terms of making big money or big something. I believe that being authentic to myself and following my instincts and following my principles, I'm eliminating some opportunities, but I'm not regretting it. I think that, it's the creation, it's the work, it's the career even, if you want, but the life and being yourself is the most important. Maybe it sounds idealistic, but it sounds pragmatic in my case.
You are fiercely yourself. You have such a strong voice as a filmmaker, which you use for human rights. And one thing I love about everything I've picked up from you over the years is you're intellectually brilliant and you have this philosophical mind, and that shows in all of your work. If you weren't a filmmaker, you could have been a journalist. If you weren't a journalist, you could have been in academia, God help you, in philosophy or something like that. But question about women specifically in the world today. If you look at the U.S. Congress now, the side that is fighting for progressive values seems to be, have a very strong group of women now. As we saw with the recent midterm election in the U.S., all these a historic number of women coming into Congress. But then the far right in Congress, all men, it's very gender divided. So we have this far right rise across Europe and the US driven by men. And how do you sort of see that in the world today? Like, is it women versus certain type of man, or what is sort of the battle lines here?
It becomes somehow, the war between two values, and some very conservative values or authoritarian values are represented by men, mostly white men of, older age, but not only. And those values of openness and progress and generosity are symbolized or represented by women, and the new generation of women as well. The women see the priorities. It means, with any generalization, it's stupid, of course, because you had plenty of women who voted for Trump. But in general, the men are defending their word, their paternalistic word of power and leadership is endangered. Is endangered also by emancipation of women, because emancipated women are not dependent anymore on the men's money and men's desires. They can make their free choices. They have the economical possibility to do it, and they have their own ambitions and their own projects, which means that the man is not the master anymore in his household. And for the long time already, he's not master in the working place, because with the wild capitalism, brutal capitalism, corporational world, the people in the working place are somehow enslaved, and they can lose the job anytime, any moment also. So the last castle of man was his house, and for the long time, even if he was not providing food with the food, the women have been playing the traditional roles. And now more and more women refuses to do it. And when they emancipate, the procreation don't become their main ambition. So if they have children, most of them have children, but they have one child, sometimes two children. They don't have 5, 6, and so on. So it's big demographical change. And the population is changing. In Europe, it will be very visible very soon, because in most of countries, even in the Catholic country, which is speaking all the time about the church and, anti-abortion laws, and so, like Poland, the procreation is shrinking and the demography is changing. It's negative for quite a long time. Same in Germany, same in Scandinavia. And if you have the countries where it's still pretty high, it's mostly because of immigrants, from Muslim immigrants mostly. So it makes men very nervous, and also their instinct, their natural instinct to preserve the genes is endangered, and they can be very violent when fighting to keep their superiority. And women feels that the rights we acquired are fragile. It's why Handmaid's Tale was so popular, because it shows that it can happen, It can happen that, and Trump's politics shown also, it can happen. And Kaczynski's politics in Poland also, it can happen that your rights, which you fought for, the hundreds years, can be taken from you. The law can change, and suddenly you are not anymore the master of your body or the master of your destiny. So, it is a big conflict, which is real conflict. It's not only that the bad man imagines something. It is a real conflict of two values and of two powers. The power of freedom for women and the power of possession for men. I think personally, I'm sure that if women only was voting in the United States, Trump will be never elected. If women only will be voting in Poland, Kaczynski's party will be not elected. It means don't have majority. I have the idea for Poland. I'm not sure if it will be possible to establish worldwide to take away the voting rights for men for 10 years. Not forever, Women didn't have the voting rights for, thousands of years, so they can have this strength, this time of thinking and understanding the, change for 10 years, maybe 15. We'll see, maybe, I'm not sure yet, but 10 years is the minimum.
Of course. Let them give us a bit of a pause so we can fix things. So, how do you see the similarities right now with what's going on in Poland and what's going on now in the US under Trump?
It is pretty similar. Poland is like small lab, and a lot of things, of course, very different countries. Small country, it never was a power. It means it was maybe in Middle Ages, but not for the long time. It's not empire. It's not like in very influential country. It's a country which had very weak economy, but the economy is growing for the last 30 years and it's going, very well somehow. But has identity problems and has a lot of complexes and has terrible religious, influence of the church. Very patriarchal society and the fear of freedom somehow. They claim that they want freedom, but in reality they're afraid of freedom. So they are escaping to some ideologies of illusion and, independence, and they are seeing danger when the danger is not, and they had this megalomaniac feeling that they have to prove that they are great. And their greatness is to being the biggest victims. So the biggest problem they have with Jews, because the Jews have been persecuted more than Poles. And that is difficult to accept. But in the same time, being the victims, in the same time, they want to be more noble and better and, and more important and always right. So that is this infantile kind of the relation with the weaker and with the past. The past needs to be embellished. The past needs to be changed to serve our agenda, our propaganda needs, or our well-feelings. The similarity is also that the big part of the population, they are the heirs of slaves. It was serfs. It was, peasant slaves, but they mean slaves. So it is also this guilt and this feeling of inferiority which is included in the society which pretend that they've been noblemen, but in reality 90% comes from slaves.
I mean, Stalin got rid of all the elite.
And he eliminated a lot of, but not all. No, we didn't have time to kill all, but Stalin and Hitler, they've been pretty solidary in eliminating Polish intellectuals. But, most of the population before the war or now is very poorly educated and and pretty ignorant, and it is like in the US. The people are very easy to manipulate because their knowledge of the world, of their knowledge of themselves is very limited. So when the populist leader comes and offers nationalistic pride and, the illusion of greatness, and to find the right enemy, it's very easy to manipulate Americans and very easy to manipulate Poles.
So, final question. You were born in Soviet-occupied Poland. Both of your parents were journalists. Your father's official cause of death was suicide while under police interrogation. You, as a young film student, you were arrested in Prague protesting the Soviet occupation, the normalization, and you spent time in prison, and a horrendous stories from that time in prison. And then just generally growing up in the Soviet Union and trying to make your way as somebody who's also Jewish in the the anti-Semitism you faced and your family faced. And now you're back in the world today with a president of the United States that studied Hitler to learn how to create propaganda and give those types of speeches. And then you have this, as we said, like the rise of the far right, this resurgent Kremlin that is very much bringing back Soviet values, bringing back Stalin. Where do you find the hope? And I know you do have hope, because it takes hope to do any sort of anything in the world. So where do you find your hope, just to see the nightmare that you grew up in come back?
Women movement, women's strength, women who really care about the project and not about their ego and not about their power. At least I hope so. So, forbid the vote for men, and give us the time to change the world for better.
You had your time, get out of the way and let us fix it.
I don't believe in my utopia, but I think that only utopia can save us in those times.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka, for everything. And your film is beautiful, and you have a gorgeous soul, and you're the soul of the film, and it's going to be watched 100 years from now. I know that for a fact. I know that. I've been to the future. They love it there.
It's our film. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Gareth Jones himself, James Norton. Norton is best known for his starring roles on the hit British television series Happy Valley, Grantchester, and McMafia. He recently played John Brooke in Greta Gerwig's Little Women. Then we'll close it off with a discussion with Peter Sarsgaard, who stars in the next Batman film, The Batman, as District Attorney Gil Colson. Sarsgaard played Bobby Kennedy in the film Jackie, and editor Chuck Lane in Shattered Glass. In Mr. Jones, he stars as Walter Duranty, the New York Times Moscow bureau chief who actively helped Stalin's regime cover up the mass murder of millions in the man-made genocide famine known as the Holodomor, death by hunger. Duranty won the Pulitzer Prize in 1932 for glowing articles about Stalin, as the conditions that would bring about the famine were already in motion. We will start the interviews with a short clip of highlights from the Mr. Jones press conference at the 2019 Berlin Film Festival, where the film premiered and these interviews took place.
First, I think that Holodomor, the great famine, big famine, Stalin's famine, it is one of the worst crime of humanity in 20th century, and made by man or by the regime, and very little known. And I felt like the ghosts of this crime are just calling for place for some kind of spotlight, for some kind of justice. So that it was like moral duty I felt when I read it. And Gareth Jones, the young man, young journalist, Welsh journalist, very well read, very well educated, very bright, and with great political instincts, even if he was only 26, 27 years old. His courage, his individual courage, and the price one is paying till now for this kind of the courage. What is the freedom of media? What is the honesty of the media? What is the agenda of the media? What is the fake news? What is alternative realities? More we've been advancing with this film, unfortunately more and more these questions became relevant and urgent somehow, because I believe that we cannot have democracy without free media.
Gareth was a good soul. From the beginning of his life, he knew what he wanted to achieve, and he paid the biggest sacrifice to achieve it. So I guess, and as Agnieszka says, in the current climate of confusion and fear, to take something from him, to learn something, is to be as courageous and clear in the pursuit for truth and empirical truth, and in sharing that truth. If it costs you, you got to pay that cost. You've got to get out there. I mean, Gareth was the most, as far as journalists are concerned, as you say. I mean, right now there is so much conversation about fake news and the media and the role of the journalist, and more than ever we need to protect journalists. As Agnieszka says, there is no democracy without a free press. So if this film can be a catalyst for that conversation and hopefully garner the respect required for journalists, and maybe even inspire some young future Gareth Jones to go out there and find the truth, and then that would be a wonderful thing.
I think that it's important to speak about the past. And when we were shooting in the small Ukrainian village, which is practically abandoned, very few people are living there, and mostly old women. And when we've been talking to those old women, they all have been the survivors of Holodomor. They all remember this very vividly. And they told me that for this scene is for their entire life, they never talk about it. So it was the silence not only between like two nations, but it was the silence also inside of the families. And this silence is like poison. So
I want to celebrate the brave journalists. And I think if we make them truly the heroes in our everyday lives, we know their names, we know who they are, we follow them. Even those of us who feel lazy about doing so, it's difficult, it's painful, but to really, really put those people's names in our minds every day, they're the spearhead. So I don't think the Durantes deserve to be called out. I don't want to hear their names.
So my friend Sarah was supposed to join us, but it's like 5 a.m. So do you remember when we were shooting in a came downstairs and I said, I'm starting a podcast, and you were the only one at the table that understood what I was talking about?
Yes, I do. And how is the podcast going?
It's still going. I'm so excited. I really like it. We're a garage band podcast, so that's why I only have one microphone.
Nice, I love it. You can't see this, but Andrea's basically getting tennis elbow right now.
I know we have a lot of great footage from various conversations about the political meaning of this, but I wanted to focus more on the work we did and draw attention to your stunning performance in this film. Stunning. People watch this and they're just like, he's incredible. But one thing I want everyone to realize is that you were thrown into we threw you into a blizzard in Ukraine. And that's how this started. Like, that was your first day on set. And then your second day on set, you had to act with a wolf, and so on and so forth. And I want everyone to know that not only are you insanely gifted, but you're also incredibly strong, because these conditions were very harsh when we started off in this production, and you were buoyant throughout, and you really carried everybody.
That's very sweet of you to say. I definitely didn't, but I contributed to a sense of warmth and, there's a sense of collaboration on that set, which I think filters down from our, as you say, fearless leader and yourself. It was infectious, and all I did was tap into Agnieszka's energy, which, as you know, is something unique and inspirational. My favorite moments of the whole film, I think, was sitting huddled around the monitors in deep, dark northern Ukraine, or somewhere near Doch, and it's freezing. It's like -15. Beast from the east is kind of killing us from all sides. And Agnieszka, every hour or so, we'd all be sitting in silence, preserving energy, and suddenly she'd start singing this quiet Polish song, like, let's not give up hope. And someone told me once that the words usually translate as like, keep on hoping, keep the hope. And then usually the Polish crew would all start to sing with her and sort of rouse the troops in such an extraordinary way. Those moments for me really epitomized, well, I guess the movie, but particularly her leadership and her energy, and she did really lead from the front. The actors are always very well looked after. It's the crew members who are in every single morning who don't get the electronic thermals underneath their clothes, which I was equipped with. So it took a group effort and an immense amount of strength from everyone involved, but we pulled it off, and we managed to get out of Ukraine relatively unscathed with a little bit of a hangover and no frostbite.
And the other thing I was really blown away by, so working on this script for a million years with Agnieszka, we barely escaped development hell. Like, we were getting horrible notes left and right on this script where people, it was like the Amadeus notes where the emperor says, I like it, but there's too many notes, too many musical notes. And you're like, what does that mean? You came in, and I was so irritated and nervous to meet you because I thought you were going to come in with like all these horrible notes that I'd have to try to decipher and apply to the script. And instead, you came in with like a surgical precision and like had a very short list for me that was very impactful. Basically, you were a gift from God when it came to giving script notes. You were. And it's to the point where like I have you on record, and this is all recording, and I almost want to say, like, for the rest of my life and your life, you need to read my work and fine-tune it. I will bring it to you when it's fully baked, and you just need to do like the final pass on it, because that's what you're so good at. You are a surgeon, and you would go in and find the little bit that I knew was wrong, that didn't feel right, but I saved it for later, and you'd always zero in on that.
I'm definitely not particularly adept at script editing, although I'd love to get better, and I'm actually trying to put some projects together of my own, and so it's a skill I need to learn. From the point of view of the actor, a good writer and a good director will acknowledge that the person who knows the inner workings of that particular mind is the person playing it. You know, you guys spend so much time on so many different characters and the story and the structure and the world and the context, and yet my role is simply just to get into Gareth's head and work out what's making him tick. So it's amazing how many times you turn up on set and the director thinks that they know that person better than you do, and it's like, well, I mean, I fully respect you and your work, but you have to understand that I've been doing my work. And so you were fantastic in allowing Vanessa and I and Peter to have a voice and come in with ideas and little small edits and cuts or additions, and this process is defined by collaboration. That's what makes good filmmakers, listening to other people and giving them a voice. So credit has to be given to you as well for allowing me that. Yeah, I think we landed on a great script. I mean, you gave us a great script, and we gave it a tiny little polish.
I love the polish so much, and it was very efficient. I mean, all the actors were great, and they all had their own language when it came to the script. But I think, given how impatient I am, the cleanness of your notes and how effective, I was like, oh, you can clean my house, you can organize my closet.
Irony is, my life couldn't be further from that. I'm like, I'm a total hoarder. I live in my life and my room, my house and my mind are just deeply cluttered and disorganized. So I might be wrong in saying this, and I probably shouldn't put it on record, but I'm pretty sure I heard one day that Steven Spielberg sends Tom Stoppard, once the script is finished, the day before they start filming, he sends it to Stoppard and he pays him an absurd amount of money to read it and give one set of notes. So I'll tell you what, we can have the Stoppard-Spielberg relationship.
Absolutely, but you're going to be doing it on a volunteer basis. I will pay you in good karma. And then I want to also say, intellectually, you're also very fierce, because we've had a lot of interesting discussions on set, and especially in rehearsals. We were locked in a conference room in Kiev with Vanessa and Agnieszka for hours, like literally 4 hours, debating French philosophers and really turning the ideology battle between Ada and Gareth, where they're quietly whispering, but it's an intense battle. It was just incredible what you were coming up with, the ideas. I would just grab stuff coming out of your mouth and put it in the script.
I mean, that mostly came from Vanessa, because there is a version of Ada which played a sort of, it was a foil for Gareth, and didn't develop the story, and particularly her own characterization. I think we all at the beginning struggled to find her voice and her motivation and her inner workings. And Vanessa and Agnieszka and you decided that work needed to be done, and actually we found something fascinating. The fact that she was living in Russia, in Moscow, fully involved in the communist experiment and the 5-year plan, and yet ideologically it was completely counter to her values system. So that's immediately a fascinating character to excavate and to pitch against Gareth, who is incredibly committed journalist, but equally non-committal as far as his own politics is concerned, and would always prioritize the search for the empirical truth. So again, allowing Vanessa that voice and allowing us that conversation, that 4-hour chat. I agree, that was one of my favorite scenes in the end, the discussion, the hushed conversation over the map of Ukraine. But you have to let the actor have that voice in order for that conversation to happen. So again, credit to you guys.
What I also want to draw people's attention to, just so they're aware of your character. No, not Gareth, but you. I was very much a freshman on campus among seniors. I was instrumental in getting the film made. I was like a tank. I was the optimistic American that was, yeah, we're going to make this, of course, among all these cynical Eastern Europeans. But then as soon as we got on set, I was completely needless and completely lost and just shell-shocked throughout all of it. And suddenly all these people and all this equipment showed up, and I didn't know what any of it meant. So I was worthless in production. And in fact, I found out this trip, the crew had a nickname for me called The Tourist.
I genuinely had no idea of that nickname. And actually, I have to say, it is an intimidating place. I mean, I have friends and family members who arrive on set, and if you're not used to the rhythm and the routine, the language, then it's a complicated and confusing environment. And so, again, you got to give yourself a break. You were the reason we were there. You were there as our collaborative, fearless leader alongside Agnieszka. I didn't even know that you had a nickname. All I think I heard you being called was Your Majesty. That was the. I'm just saying. You were very much like our producer and our leader. So don't worry about it. No, there's nothing to I can't even remember one moment of imparting some sage advice. If I did, you should tell me what it was, because I need it every day myself.
But how much do you love that I turned this interview around on me?
Exactly, I love it.
So, Peter, it is an honor to sit here with you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Sorry, we're super low budget. So I am here in Berlin on the day of the world premiere of our film, Mr. Jones, which you star in, which everyone's freaking out over your performance who has seen the film. Like, you steal the show. I mean, our acting across the board is incredible, but you're magic.
Is it just because of my nude scene that you say that?
And yes, that was a lot of the magic that went into it.
Just naked, I would say. But I mean, and you wrote this scene, obviously. But
Hoping to cast you.
sure. But like, it felt more naked because I was in those leather stirrups.
Yes, because Walter Duranty had a wooden leg from a train accident. So you were not only naked, but you had the leather stirrups on.
It's more naked than naked.
You were working in a dense forest of naked extras. How did that work out?
They were all young and incredibly beautiful men and women. And it's difficult to stay focused under such circumstances because you're very conscious of being an old, out of, past his prime guy.
But you were like the Mick Jagger of the set. Like, the more takes we did, the more like your arms were flailing, the more you're like jagging it up.
The thing that you get when you work with a director like Agnieszka is freedom. I mean, that's really what someone who's a master knows to do, right? You think like, oh, they're like a horse whisperer with actors. It's really not like that. They just look at you. I mean, Agnieszka, she just looks at you and smiles, and you do a take, and then she comes up and she talks to someone, and she might be kind of stern with them. Then she turns to the actor and she smiles at you and she says, "One more, please." And then she goes back. It's just very supportive and lovely. I mean, it's really on you.
Absolutely. And she gave me, over the 3 years we worked together, so much freedom on the script. I was amazed. There was one point where I just went off and like did a big deep rewrite and I put all this like hidden feminist goddess ancient Mesopotamian symbolism in it. And I was like, I have a new draft for you. And she's like, great. So if I had freedom on the script, that means the actors had like all of us were like tinkering away, working on the script together. Like, you were helping me write some of your scenes and lines.
One of the things that really helped with this was that I was fascinated with the guy, right? Walter Duranty. I wanted to know how someone had that life, right? From Aleister Crowley to hosting the world's literati in Moscow and being sort of the docent for the Western world to Moscow. And so I was fascinated with his life. And so I felt like I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to learn about him. So when I showed up, I would say more than a lot of other projects I've worked on, even with real people, I was armed with a lot of information. And so we were able to communicate, and I think from, an intelligent point of view, one with facts. So we'd say, he wasn't strictly an asshole. He also did this, and I got to defend him a little bit with information.
That first meeting with you and I met in a vegan pizza parlor in Warsaw and talked for hours, having a grad school discussion about Walter Duranty and his life. It was clear that you came fully armed with all this research. And that was one of the most gratifying experiences. I felt like I was alone for so long with this little world. And here comes a fellow nerd to nerd out with me. And we're speaking the same language for so long. And it was just so gratifying.
I mean, how messed up would it be if we went to go do this film, which is about the truth and letting the truth out, and we told a bunch of lies about the guy who was the liar? I mean, that would be common. In truth, that would be sort of commonplace, but we don't.
Well, your character, Walter Duranty, was actually my gateway drug into the project, because I was a college kid with this big dream of making this movie, and I was researching, well, why would a guy like Walter Duranty, who I grew up knowing about because he covered up this genocide famine that my family had suffered through, why would he do something that's so against the ethics of journalism by covering up this famine? Like, he writes in the New York Times, there is no famine. And so the more I researched him, I'm like, wait, he was lovers with the great Satanist Aleister Crowley. He did all this opium. He wrote hymns for satanic orgies in 1920s Paris. And as a college kid, you're like, this is incredible.
Isidore Duncan, all these people are coming and hanging out with him. I mean, when you really start to think about the life and lifestyle that he was protecting, and also I think for him, access, right? That's probably what he would have said in response to any of the criticism was, well, if I write that, then I lose access and then we have no information. So, for him, it wasn't covering something up. It was maybe ignoring the details of something. And then as it got to grow larger, of course, it gets to be more difficult to ignore. And hopefully it gnawed away at him somewhat. But in the meantime, he had this incredible world going on, And if you just think about for a guy who'd gone through World War I and seen the level of destruction that he had seen and personal devastation, I can see how he stuck his head in the sand, and not even to excuse him at all, but just it kind of started to make sense to me.
And at the same time, when he was going to school in Liverpool, he signed up, he volunteered to be on the side of the people. He served his school somehow by busting truants who would then be caned. So it's even at a young age, he aligned himself with abusive authority almost to reap the benefits of being part of that authority. And he did that as an adult in Moscow.
Align yourself with power. It's like everyone who stands around Trump right now. You're like, how are they doing that? Well, they're probably the story they're telling their wives and children, husbands as they go home is we have to be in the room in order to turn the ship around at all or avoid the obstacle that's coming. And so you got to be in it. And if I am too critical of it, then I won't be in it. And someone else will be who's less of a decent person than I am. So I think you make those kinds of excuses to yourself. One thing I'm really glad I didn't do was a Liverpudlian accent, which it actually occurred to me at one point, and I remember mentioning it to this dialect coach I was working with, and she went, "Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that."
No, it was incredible, how you moved mountains to be part of this project. People have to know. And you showed up on set completely jet lagged, and you just dove into the role. You dove into the lines, and you didn't miss a beat. And you were such a calming presence on set. You were like the Fonz. But I kept calling you Mr. Xanax. People have to know how absolutely easy you are to work with, how inspiring you are to work with. Because you're always so gentle with me as this super green and shell-shocked screenwriter running up to you and going, does this line work? Does that sound right? Is this the proper?
I told you I'm more drawn to people at the beginning and people at the end. So we'll see how you are with me in the middle. I was working on this other project with a first-time filmmaker that, required all of me in a different way. When I came here, I felt very comfortable because, we had an incredible crew, and we had Agnieszka as our leader. And frankly, coming from the other film where it was more like I would say we have limited time, ditch that shot, let's just shoot the whole thing here. Thinking a little bit more than being an actor, it was a calming place for me. It was an easy place for me. So, some actors work better thinking the whole crew hates them. I work better thinking the whole crew's rooting for me. So.
Everybody was madly in love with you, and you're just hanging out in your smoking jacket in your wooden peg leg, basking in the sun between takes. It was just a magical experience. And I have to say, the set that you were living on for days, Walter Durante's apartment, it was this gorgeous Art Deco apartment from the era with all these rooms sprouting off of the main hallway, and it was all richly built. You felt like you're back in time, and there's cigarettes burning and incense burning and naked extras just, lounging around.
Everyone was very comfortable with their nudity. Which if we had shot this in the States, I would have been covering up a lot more.
It felt very authentic it felt like it was a party on set that day.
Absolutely. And, the production design really, I can't tell you how many times as an actor I'll walk into a room and be like, this is my bedroom? Seriously? With the Duran Duran poster over my bed? Who do you think I am? Who? Because that defines you so much, right? And people, it's not just your acting that defines you. They go, that's his bedroom. And so I felt supported always by the production design, so many of the decisions that were going into the filmmaking that's probably why I was Mr. Xanax.
Final question. So, in terms of what Durante stood for you, like what important reminder he is for us today, and where even prestigious institutions like the New York Times can get things wrong, and that we shouldn't just have blind faith just because there's some fancy title associated with something. So, what in general, like given that you've lived this role, what sort of reminder do you want Durante to carry for audiences today in this world of fake news?
Well, I think in the world of fake news, you can't rely on the information that you get minute to minute, second to second. You have to see how things shake out over time. I really think that's the only way to understand things, and not to make decisions based off of things that happened 5 minutes ago or even a day ago or even a week ago, is to take a step back and, as the Eameses would say, do a power of 10 and get a little bit of perspective on the general movement of things, and protect journalists. You know, journalists are being murdered all over the world, and it is a sacred job. It is as sacred as being a priest.
It's beautiful. Final question, because I'm going to abuse my power. That's what this interview is about. So what do you think Walter Durante, Pulitzer Prize winner for the New York Times Moscow bureau chief, he finally won his O. Henry Award after struggling for so long to be recognized as a great fiction writer. He was surrounded by great artists. He essentially brokered a deal between the Soviets and FDR's government for official recognition of the Soviet Union. He spent hours with FDR advising him on policy. What do you think he would think of this film?
Well, you know, he was interested in screenwriting also, didn't he? Go and live in Southern California, and I guess they were working on a short story, but I could imagine that he would wish that he had written it.
That makes me feel so much better that I'm like, and I got to write it and avenge all these people.
Yeah, exactly. I think he would have changed a few things.
Thank you so much.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We want to encourage you to donate to your local food bank, which is experiencing a spike in demand. We also encourage you to donate to Direct Relief at directrelief.org, which is supplying much-needed protective gear to first responders working on the front lines in the U.S., China, and other hard-hit parts of the world.
We encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Syria. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production managers are Nicholas Torres and Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Bissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon: Adam Levine,
Alabama,
Alan Liu,
and Marshall,
Barbara Kittredge,
Brian Tajudin.
You were right, it's Brian Tajudin.
I was right. I know. I saw.
Sorry, Brian. Kai Gillis,
Carol Gulstad,
Kat Cooper,
Catherine Anderson Carina,
Charles Othier,
Christine Morrigan,
Daniel Passaretti,
David Porter,
Diana Gallagher,
D.L. Singfield,
Elizabeth Dove,
Emmy,
Eric Kaplan,
Irina Guardia,
Ethan Mann,
Evan Rosemore,
Fontaine Carpenter,
George Hughes,
Greg Kreimer,
Gustav Halsby,
Janet Robinson,
Jared Lombardo,
Jason Benke,
Jason Rita,
Jeff Thompson,
Jennifer Slavic,
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
Jill Newman,
John Atrix,
John Laughlin,
John Ripley,
Karen Humphreys,
Kate Cotton,
Katie McHugh,
Katie Masuris,
Keith Goldschach,
Kelly Ranson,
Kevin Gannon,
Kevin M. Garnett,
Christy Vitale,
Kristen Custer,
Lawrence Graham,
Leo Chalupa,
Lindsay Eggleston,
Lisa LaFlame,
Loretta Carroll Strong,
Lorraine W. Todd,
Lynn Schneider,
Mandy Farrapore,
Marcus J. Trent,
Margaret Moe,
Mark,
Matt Perez,
Matthew Womack,
Maureen Murphy,
Michael Steiniff,
Michael Wooldridge,
Michelle Dash,
Mike Tripico,
Nicole Spear,
Oliver Ash,
Pamela Newport,
Ray Alba,
Rhonda White,
Rich Craw,
Richard Smith,
Rip N. Rowe,
Sandra Kalnins,
Sonia Bogdanovic,
Sean Berg,
Sharon Hattrick,
Solomon Hikes,
Tanya Chalupa,
Victoria Nordgren,
Victoria Olson,
William Barry Reeves,
Ren.
Zachary Lemon.
Thank you all so much. We could not make the show without you.